Hey everyone, it's Allie, and we're here with Awakening with Allie. I'm so honored and excited for today's show and this incredible guest, you guys. He is known as he has many things he's known for, but first off, he's known for beating cancer, and which of course is no small victory. And I want him to tell his story. But he's also a best-selling author, he's a patient advocate, and of course, a cancer survivor. And I want him to share his story with you guys. But as you know, here on Awakening with Allie, I'm all about my own awakening, what I've been through. And I love bringing on others to share their stories and their awakening to help us all move through this and awaken to so much better in our lives, in our health, in our abundance, in our wellness. So without further ado, this is Chris Wark. Thank you so much for being here on Awakening with Ali. I want you to just tell us a little bit more than I shared in the bio of you, Chris, and how this journey kind of unfolded for you.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26 years old. That was December 2003. So coming up on 20 years. And at that time, being a young person, I was having abdominal pain. Those were the symptoms: abdominal pain, just kind of weird abdominal pain that didn't feel like anything I'd felt before. And it persisted for the better part of a year before I got it checked out, and eventually had a colonoscopy, and that's where they found a golf ball sized tumor in my colon. And so, which is the large intestine, for anyone who doesn't know what the colon is. And I was told, we've got to get you into surgery right away and get this thing out of you before it spreads and kills you. It was biopsy confirmed cancer. And at that time, I would say I was a very typical cancer patient because I was clueless. I didn't know what cancer was, really. I'd never had anybody close to me go through the disease or go through treatment. And so I was blind and ignorant. And most cancer patients are the way I was. They don't know what they don't know. And they're rushed into treatment out of fear with very little information. The meetings that cancer patients get, first, they get the shock of a diagnosis, which is traumatic and puts you in fight or flight. And when you're in a state of fear and panic and anxiety, your body chemistry changes, your brain hormones change, your brain chemicals change. And uh, when you're in a state of stress and fight or flight, you can't think clearly or rationally or logically. And you are very vulnerable to coercion when you're in a state of fear. And this is what happens in doctors' offices, cancer clinics every day. Patients are manipulated through fear into saying yes to treatments that they do not understand, that are highly dangerous, highly toxic, and for many patients, ineffective. And when I say ineffective, let me be very clear: they don't cure the disease. They might slow it down, they might stave it off for a bit, but probably the most shocking statistic that most people are not aware of in terms of cancer is the fact that the overall death rate from cancer in the United States has only come down about 5% in almost 70 years.
Wow. I did not know that.
Think about that. 5% reduction in the death rate. And that's the ultimate measure of success, right? How many people are dying of cancer every year? And it's come down 5%. And so, and that's largely due to a handful of cancers. Childhood leukemia, they've done very well with that. The lymphomas are highly treatable. People live a long time with lymphomas. Even adult leukemia like CLL. These are all blood-based cancers. Testicular cancer is mostly, for the vast majority of young men, is curable. So they've done really well with those cancers, but they have made very, very dismal progress with most solid tumor cancers. So breast, liver,
Wow.
lung, colon, ovarian, cervical, brain, like bone marrow cancer, sarcomas, pancreatic. There's a long list of cancers that they haven't improved the death rate at all, and another list that they've barely made a dent. So I didn't know any of that. right? I didn't know
Sure.
any of that. And I assumed that my doctor, knew, the best treatments for me, and that whatever they were suggesting was, those are the best options. So when they said you have to have surgery right away, I was like, okay, I guess I have to have surgery. I don't know what else to do. And I just trust the doctors, and that's what I'm going to do. And I went in for surgery. And by the way, I was told they were trying to get me into surgery just within a couple days. And this is very common for cancer patients. They're rushed into treatment, right? They're having surgery within a few days, or they're starting chemo within a few days, or they're starting radiation within a few days. And that's not enough time to think or read or research or anything. And you're still in a state of shock and fear. And you just kind of get herded into, it's like getting herded onto the train. So, but they wanted to have me in surgery right away. And I ended up postponing it because it was just a couple days before Christmas. And I was like, can I not be in the hospital on Christmas? Like, this is depressing enough. So I went in on December 30th. They took out a third of my large intestine. When I woke up, they said, it's worse than we thought. We were hoping you'd be stage 2, which if you're stage 2, we take out the tumor and then send you home and you're done. Stage 3 means you need chemo because the cancer is spread to your lymph nodes. You have circulating tumor cells all over your body looking for places to form new tumors. It's just a matter of time before new tumors are going to form. And the whole point of chemo is to hopefully kill all of these circulating cancer cells and prevent metastasis. So, things kind of went from bad to worse.
Before you go into that, can you explain for those that don't know, and honestly don't know, what is metastasis when you speak to that, when they were saying that it'll spread and then become that?
What is metastasis?
Yes.
Yeah. So stage 3 means that the cancer is spread from a primary tumor site to surrounding lymph nodes. Stage 4 means that the cancer is spread into other organs. So if you have, a tumor in your colon and you have a lesion on your liver, that would be stage 4, right? Or you have a tumor in your colon and one in your lung, that's stage 4. So anytime there's cancer in 2 organs, they call it stage 4. And metastasis is just a fancy word for the cancer spread. So I'm in the hospital. I'm just like feeling pretty hopeless, and had just sort of accepted, like, okay, I guess I got to do chemo. And a couple things happened in the hospital that are worth mentioning. And I talk about this in my book. Yeah. The first meal that they served me after cutting out a third of my large intestine was a sloppy Joe. And anybody hearing that should probably be thinking what you're thinking, like, that's the worst food I can think of, right? This is the worst example of like industrial cafeteria food that you would get at summer camp or in the military or prison,
That was
right?
literally your first meal after you
Yes.
came out of the post-op surgery. That's what
Mhm.
they gave to you.
That was the first meal, a sloppy Joe, prison
Wow.
food.
Wow.
And so, you know, that was surprising, right? That was surprising. Why are they feeding this horrible, just trash food to sick people, cancer patients, the person on down the hall that just had a heart attack? Like, this is what's lunch today for everybody in the hospital, unless they're on some especially restrictive diet or something. So I I ate the sloppy Joe because I was really hungry. Truth be told. A couple days later, I was doing better, and they said, you're going to get to go home today. And my surgeon came in to check on me. He was doing his rounds, and we were having a conversation. And I just happened to say, hey, is there any food I need to avoid? Because I'm a fairly rational, logical person. And so I was just thinking, like, I want to make sure there isn't some like food like that could screw things up, like hot sauce, or, who knows, right? Like, don't eat anything with spice in it after your surgery, right? Who knows what they're going to tell you? And so I asked him, is there any food I need to avoid? And he was like, nah, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. That was it. I mean, that was his little funny catchphrase that he told all his post-op surgical patients, right? Abdominal surgery. Don't lift anything heavier than a beer, buddy.
So literally no restrictions, no, don't worry about anything. Just literally don't
No,
lift anything heavier than a beer can. And that's
right.
it.
Yeah. And what's the message really? The message underneath that is it doesn't matter what you eat, and you can even drink alcohol. Who cares? Right?
Right. Right.
There's nothing you need to do, nothing you need to change in your life whatsoever to help yourself. And this is the inherent problem with the medical industry and with the cancer industry is that patients are victimized.
Mhm.
The way that we're victimized is you're told there's nothing you did to contribute to your disease. It's not your fault. You just have just bad luck, right? You're just a victim of genetics and bad luck, either or, maybe both, a little bit of both.
Right.
And because we don't want you to feel bad about the choices that you've made that led you up to this point.
Yeah.
Smoking is the number one cause of cancer. And many doctors don't even tell cancer patients to quit smoking.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
I mean, it's well documented. If you quit smoking, your rate of survival is much better. Alcohol, major cause of cancer, a known cause of cancer. And cancer patients are almost never told to stop drinking alcohol. We also know cancer patients who drink alcohol have worse survival. It's clearly documented. And they're not even told, hey, don't drink alcohol, right? If you want to live, stop smoking. You've got to stop smoking. You got to stop drinking alcohol. This will help you survive. It'll increase your odds. Just those two basic pieces of advice are so powerful, and patients are not even told to do that.
Well, yeah, and I think what you just spoke to also so deeply was the victim, right? Is like we're constantly made like the victim in so many situations, and then we don't even know how to get out of that victim mentality because we're being fed that to what you're speaking
Yeah.
to. That's exactly what they're doing. It's like, oh, I did my job, I did the surgery, you're good, you're a victim, it's okay, but just go back to what you were doing. And it's like, wait, shouldn't we be empowering and educating and helping our patients, not keeping them in the victim mentality?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my opinion, is it's egregious malpractice to treat patients that way, to keep them in this state of fear and anxiety and worry and hopelessness and helplessness, right? By being victimized. Because what they're saying is, like, I'm repeating myself, there's nothing you did,
Yeah.
right, to contribute to your disease. And therefore, there's nothing you can do to help yourself except show up for treatment.
Right,
Right?
right. We've
That
got
that
we've got the fix for you. Yeah.
That's the most important thing. You just make sure you book your next appointment at the desk before you leave, and we get you scheduled for treatment. Right. This is the most important thing you can do for yourself is just come back and let us treat you. And by the way, this is big business. And cancer, the average cancer patient's worth 300,000 plus in revenue.
Wow.
Sometimes upwards of $1 million in revenue, depending on the disease, from surgery, radiation, chemotherapy treatments, other drugs, hospital visits, doctor's visits, breast reconstruction, nipple tattoos. It is big business.
Right.
And it'd be one thing if everybody was getting cured, but they're not,
Yeah.
right? They're not. So I go home, I'm recovering from surgery, and I'm weaning myself off the pain medication. And as I started to sober up, just over, the course of a few days, I really started to think about my life and my future and what was to become of me. And I realized, I saw myself as a chemo patient, and
Mm,
I had seen chemo patients in the world in real life, right?
right.
Sure, you see them in movies and TV and stuff, but I'd seen them out there in the world, at the mall or church or somewhere.
Sure.
And, it's alarming when you see a person, especially when and have advanced terminal cancer, and they've been through treatment for years, and their bodies are just destroyed.
Yeah. They look like they're withering away.
Yeah. I mean, emaciated, yellow skin, no hair, I mean, just, yeah. And so I just saw like, that's my future. If I go down this path, this is my future. And it was It's pretty frightening. So I had this internal resistance to chemotherapy, right? And I didn't know what else to do, but I'm a Christian, and my wife and I prayed about it. And I just said, God, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, please show me. Like, I need help. I don't know what to do. And I trust you that you're going to supply all of my needs. Right. So it wasn't just a prayer of a desperation and help, but it was also a prayer of faith. Like, I'm
Yeah.
believing that you're going to provide for me. Like, I'm asking and I'm believing I'm going to receive something. And so, uh, 2 days later, I get a book that was sent to me from a guy who knew my dad. And this man named Al Strawn lived in Alaska. We're in Tennessee, but he was a business colleague of my dad's and client of my dad's. And he sent me a book about healing cancer with raw food,
Oh, wow.
written by George Malcolmus. George had discovered he had colon cancer back in the 1970s. He had seen people around him, his mother and other people around him, go through cancer treatment and suffer and die. Then he gets a diagnosis and happened to have a friend who was a health nut. Basically said, man, you need to get on a raw food diet. Like, go back to the Garden of Eden, raw fruits and vegetables, and you should start juicing carrots and drink carrot juice every day. And so that's what George did. And within a year, there's no tumor, right? His body had healed. His body had healed. It wasn't a miracle cure. It was just healing. Healing happened. And because he supplied his body with what it needed to heal, and he stopped polluting it and injuring it with toxic food. So that was, I mean, I was only a couple chapters into his book, and I was choked up on the couch, like tears coming down my face. I knew this was an answer to prayer. I just knew
So
it. Like,
So was to you when you received that book, obviously that was a sign from God and received, right, as a gift from him who had sent it to you through this person, right? Because we have different messengers in our life. So to you, was that like the start of like, okay, I'm going to go on the holistic path? Like you knew, because you said you already knew internally there was a resistance to the chemo, which I truly believe in our God-given intuition. And we really feel something like that for a reason. So you had already felt that, and then you received this book. Was that like the next nudge of like, okay, I'm taking this holistic path, I'm not going back into the medical office?
for sure. I mean, I converted overnight to raw food. And I mean, I hadn't even finished the book. I was just like, I knew it. I was like, I know I have to do this. And I was excited to do it because part of it was just fascination of like, this is really interesting. Like, this guy's making this case of like, if you eat raw fruits and vegetables exclusively, you're supplying your body with an abundance of nutrients that it can use to heal, repair, regenerate, detoxify, and heal. And so I'm like, this makes a lot of sense to me. And I wonder what would happen if I did it. So I was really curious. I wanted to know. And back then, like, a lot of people have heard of the raw food diet. Now, I mean, it's social media and there's all kinds of, beautiful influencers touting their raw food meals on Instagram and stuff, right? But back when, and this was January 2004, like, the raw food diet I had never heard of it. And I quickly learned that it was a diet for sick people and weirdos. Right. And I was like, well, that's me. So this is perfect. So I went to Whole Foods, loaded up the cart, bought a juicer. Back then, Whole Foods used to sell juicers. And went home and I just started. Like, and here's the thing. There's some things in life are hard to change. Your diet is not one of them. Like, you can change your diet today. You can change what you're eating today. You can start exercising today. And those two things are two of the most powerful things you can do to help yourself prevent and heal chronic disease, is changing your diet and exercising. Like, oh, it sounds so simple. Yeah, it really is simple. It really is. The truth is simple. Lies are complicated. So I was on my way. I just got going. I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm going to figure it out. And I started, just what I took massive action. Things seemed good, but very quickly, word spread around my family about what I was doing, and multiple people tried to talk me out of it. And were telling me things like, you can't, you have to do what the doctor says. You've got to do chemo. Don't if there was something better, don't you think they'd know about it? And, I know somebody that tried alternative therapy and they died. Like those kind of things. That's like, and that was causing a lot of fear and worry and anxiety and stress, like these conversations.
Yeah.
And these are people who love me. Like I get it. They wanted me to live, but they also were coming from a place of fear and also and ignorance and trying to really talk me into doing something that they didn't even understand themselves.
Right.
And that made it more difficult. And I realized uh, I'm going to have to do this alone. Right. I may have to do this alone with no support. And I was, I guess, had the determination and the will to live was strong. And I was like, I'm doing it. Like I'm doing it because I want to live.
Right.
And that sense of control and responsibility over my life was, I mean, it's incredibly empowering when you take control of your life. Like you
Yeah.
just feel better. You feel good. You emotionally, mentally, even physically, like things change.
Well, and going back to what you were saying, Chris, earlier in the conversation, you spoke to the victim. And I think that's such a beautiful example of like you removed yourself from that victim mode and you're like, no, I'm going to take back my health and my power and my freedom of who I am. And even though others may not understand it, like I know what I'm doing because it feels right to me. So I'm going to own it and I'm going to do it. And, obviously, I can't relate to cancer, but in my own postpartum depression journey and different things that I did on a holistic level, and I healed. I understand that because I had many people around me that were like, well, just take this, we'll just take that medication, just do that. And I wanted to actually heal and find the root to what was going on with me and heal my trauma and be able to do, thriving and do so much better. And so I agree with you. Like I had to move myself out of being the victim to being the victor in my life to understand, like, oh, it does feel good. And I love that you said that because I think so many people are starting to wake up now and are starting to realize, like, oh, I can take back my health. I can take back my wellness and my freedom. And it does feel good when I actually do it. I just have to get intentional about it and stop playing into this victim mentality. So I just had to say that.
I love it. You understand. Yeah. That it was the same. And we had the same mindset.
Yeah.
And when you take control of your life and your health and you decide I'm not going to be a victim, right? Then you empower yourself to change. And one of the most important things that I realized through introspection that I had was, and this is critical for every person with a chronic disease or cancer, the most important thing is the belief that healing is possible. Right? That is the catalyst for change, right? If you don't believe that healing's possible, if you don't believe you can recover, if you don't believe you can survive, you're kind of just dead in the water already, right? But I believed healing was possible, and that empowered me to take action, to start reading and researching and learning and like, what can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? And I just started creating this simple healing routine for myself, right? That was I just optimized my day to get the most anti-cancer nutrition into my body possible every single day. And I talk about this in great detail in my book, Chris Beat Cancer. And so once I got that into place, like once I got my routine in place, and it was just rinse and repeat, right? It's just every day taking care of myself. I restructured my life. And by the way, I wasn't like a rich guy. I mean, I didn't have much extra money, but I realized like the most important thing I can spend money on is on my health. And so I started prioritizing, right, what I spent money on. And it was mostly food. Okay. Food and supplements.
When I love that you
Uh,
said that because I think like so many like people even say to me, like, oh, well, I can't, quote unquote, afford that or I can't do that. And it's like, well, yes, you can. And I had the same mindset, by the way, before I went on my journey of like, oh, I can't either. And then you start to realize like where you're actually spending your money, like you said, and you reprioritize it. And I also like saw in my own journey that when you reprioritize and you actually put your health first, everything else falls in alignment and like God shows up and gives you so much more and you have so much more abundance to work from. So I'm curious for you as you went through your healing journey, if you experienced the same, and also like what kept you going on this holistic path before you actually saw that you actually beat the cancer? Because of course, is what your book is all about. But like, what kept you going to know like you were actually going to beat it and have the confidence to know that you were going through this path, in a positive way? Because I can imagine that was really vulnerable, especially being alone for you.
It was, and I can tell you, the big struggle for a cancer patient, whether they're going conventional or holistic, is the fear, because every day you wake up and at some point you remember that you have cancer, and the best parts of your day are the parts where you forget, where you're busy, you're distracted, you're working, or you're having fun with your family or friends or watching a movie or something, and you forget you have cancer, but then you remember, and here comes this wave of fear. And so I learned quickly that I had to surrender my fear to God. Like every time I would feel afraid, I would just say, okay, God, all right, I'm not going to be afraid. Right. I'm feeling it. Right. But I'm choosing to just lay it down. Like, I trust you. I'm giving you my fear. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to let fear steal my joy. So that was, and I didn't pray that one time. Like, it was every day, multiple times throughout the day, every day. And then I would also I learned how to practice gratitude. And gratitude is just simply counting your blessings, because I certainly was struggling with resentment and anger and, just why me? Why am I going through this? Like, this sucks, and I was resentful of pretty much, show me a person who didn't have cancer, I would resent them, you know? And so, but I also realized, like, this is not healthy mentally, and emotionally. And so I found the secret to, or the antidote even to those emotions, was practicing gratitude. So in the middle of the most frustrating or difficult circumstance, I could just stop in that moment and say, okay, I know what's bad, but let me just remind myself what's good in my life. What's good in my life. And I have a wife who loves me. I have a home. I have a dog that's great. you know, I've got a car. Um, I have air conditioning and running water. I have food in the refrigerator. And as I would just start like taking stock of all the good things in my life, my attitude would just change. I mean, it just takes a moment of reflection. And I still do that today, right? That is my gratitude hack, and it works. It works so well. And the other thing, my gratitude hack is actually one sentence, and it's this: right now, there's someone dying in the hospital that would love to trade places with you.
Wow. It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it. They would love your problem, right? Can
Yeah.
we trade?
Right.
They'd love to have your problem. So, uh, that's just a hard reset, you know, and so day by day, I would, those two things, like giving my fear to God and practicing gratitude, and then just staying the course. And I was able to assemble a support system, a very small one, but I found a naturopathic doctor who supported me, and then I found an integrative oncologist, uh, that the naturopathic doctor knew. You see, there's a network.
Yeah.
There's this sort of like underground network of holistic practitioners. They're not advertising on TV, right? But it's all word of mouth, and they're out there. And once you find one, it kind of opens up. It opens up because a lot of them know each other.
Yeah.
And even this was, this is pre-social media, right? So there was no YouTube or Facebook. I mean,
Yeah, that's crazy. Because you think about now, like, I mean, even for me, when I was going through my journey, even though it wasn't as heavily spoken about for depression, I was able to at least find holistic people in the space to like have a supporting conversation. So I could only imagine back then when, you're not able to listen to conversations or, where now people are talking about this all the time and asking questions, like you were really at the forefront of it, of like digging
Yeah.
into what is this holistic approach? What is an alternative approach to what does not feel right in my body for me to do?
I didn't have anybody to talk to. And that was hard. I didn't have
Yeah,
anybody to talk to.
I can't
I had a
imagine.
couple conversations with like cancers, two different ladies who had kind of survived cancer, and they did some holistic stuff, but they really weren't equipped to, you know, I mean, it was a helpful conversation a little bit, but they weren't equipped to really empower me.
Yeah,
They were
sure.
just living their lives and had kind of moved on. And so, yeah, I just went from book to book to book. So all my encouragement came from books. You know, it was, Dr. Lorraine Day, and of course, George Malcolmus, and Dr. Richard Schultz, and Paul Bragg. Uh, and so my mom, it turns out, had been stockpiling all these health and wellness books for years. She never had any health problems, but she had all these health and wellness books. She had the original book on rebounding
Oh, wow.
by Al Carter. She had books by Pablo Areola, Louise Hay. I mean, just stacks and stacks of books on raw foods and alternative cancer treatments, all kinds of stuff. Like it was a miracle. Like it really was. It was miraculous that she had collected and read all of these health and wellness books just as someone who liked to learn. And so fast forward, I basically and I hope your audience will read my book, because there's so much in there. I mean, obviously what I did, but there's multiple chapters that sort of help you understand how the cancer industry, the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry operate, right? And there's a lot of perils and pitfalls in those industries. There's certainly, they can be very helpful, but there's also a lot of risk. And you don't want to go in blind, right? You want to be educated so you can make the best decision for you and for your loved ones. And
Well,
so,
and there's a lot of money to be made, like you said earlier. I mean, let's be real. I think we're all seeing
yeah,
this more and more now just play out in the medical system, period, with everything that went on in 2020. Like, there's a lot
yes,
of money to be made. And that doesn't mean that every single doctor obviously is bad, or every single person, is quote unquote evil. But when you have a lot of money to be made and you have people making decisions from that space, they're not necessarily always going to be thinking about you as the individual, which is why what you're doing is being an advocate and empowering people, like you're saying, and don't go in blind. And when you spoke earlier, Chris, about, that fight, flight, or freeze and that real true fear that comes up. I mean, I'm a certified breathwork practitioner now because of my healing journey I went through. And I recognize, so much of my fear and not being able to make clear decisions was because I was in a dysregulated nervous system. And so I love that you brought that up, because it's true. It's like when you're pushed through and you're just shoved into this is what it needs to be. And you're just in that fight or flight, and you're like, okay, I'll just do it because you don't can think of anything else. It's like, no, you take your power back, like you said. You listen to your intuition, you take a step back and say, wait, this is a really big decision. I need to think about this for a moment. I need to not just rush in. And I love that you said, like, you gave your fear to God, you surrendered, you prayed on it, and then you move forward with obviously the signs that came forward with your book. And so fast forward to your book now that you have out there, like, what would you tell someone who is, in your position or worse, that feels hopeless and is like, okay, I'm listening to this. You've got my attention. I don't want to go the medical route, but I'm also really scared and I am in fear. It's a real thing. Like, what about your book? What about your story? How can you help them? And I know you've helped so many people already, but I want you to share for my audience that doesn't know.
well, my best advice is read my book, right? Read the book, because you will get so much hope and encouragement and inspiration and practical steps that you can take action to help yourself. Okay. And I never tell people don't do chemo, don't do conventional treatment. Like, that's not my message. My message is actually, one, inform yourself so you can make the best decision for you. Like, you got to learn about these treatment, learn about your disease, learn about the treatment options and the risks and benefits, but then also learn that there's so much you can do to help yourself with nutrition and exercise and supplementation, your attitude, your mindset, with faith, with forgiveness. There's so much you can do to help yourself, whether you do chemo or not. These other things help you immensely, right? They will increase your odds of survival no matter what other treatments you do. Okay. So that's really my big message. Now, there's certainly people in my community that decide they eschew all conventional treatment and they go all natural. And there's other people in our community that do conventional treatment, and they're also doing all the holistic stuff too, as much as they can. So we just encourage them and love on them and support them. And, I just want to help people get well. And the big problem in medicine is that, sure, there's a lot of good doctors. There's some bad ones. Like, make no mistake, there are some just as many bad doctors as there are bad plumbers. Okay. There are doctors who are selfish, who are narcissistic, who are sociopathic. There are some very bad doctors. There's also doctors who are just so busy that they provide lousy patient care because they're overloaded,
Yeah.
right? They're
Or
good
they've been
people.
put through a system, right? Who just tells them what to say and what to regurgitate, and they're not
Well,
actually researching what they're
I'm
being
getting to
told.
that. So in spite of everything I've just said, the other big problem is that doctors are trained in a system that pays them really well despite the results. And generally, they're not taught to heal, they're just taught to prescribe drugs. Now, surgeons, if you have an acute injury or something that can be handled surgically, hey, that's great, right? Gunshot wound, awesome. Broken leg, like, take me to the hospital. But for chronic disease, cancer, diabetes, MS, heart disease, right? Autoimmune diseases, the current medical model is abysmal. I mean, by and large, they're not helping anybody heal. They're just helping them get out of bed, right? And they're keeping people in a state of what I call vertical illness, right? Vertical means you can get out of bed,
Mm.
right? You're not well, but you can get out of bed. You can function. And that's not optimal. That's not ideal. That does not equate to a good life. And as you know, and I'm sure most of your audience knows, once you get on any kind of medication, your health will spiral down, right? Because medications have side effects. And then all of a sudden now you need two drugs, right? And then a few months to a few years later, now you need a third drug for the
Yeah.
side effects of the first two. And you're on, drugs for the side effects of drugs for the side effects of drugs. And you've got people taking 10 and 12 different
I was
prescriptions.
gonna say, it reminds me of my grandmother when she was here physically. She passed from lymphoma, and her pill box was like literally like, I mean, just the table length of my desk long, and every box had like 6 pills. And I was like, what is each of these for? Well, this one is for this, and this one's for that, and that one's because this does this. And it was like, what? And even as a young kid, even though I didn't really understand it, I knew that something was off about that. Like, that did not feel right to me that you had this long, lengthy box that just kept getting added to and packed into. And it was like, but wait, so what's actually getting healed here? Like, what's helping?
Nothing. Right. Yeah. And so that's the disease path, right? That's the path that most Americans are on. And my big message here is that, chronic disease is mostly caused by our diet and lifestyle. That's what's causing it. And the good news is, and look, I'm not trying to blame anybody or shame anybody. This is the revelation I had in my own life. Like, hey, the way you're living is killing you. And so you better get on a new path because you're
Yeah.
on the disease path. You better get on the healthy path and figure out what that is. And so uh incredible things happen when you change your diet and you start exercising, and then you really look at your life and ask yourself, okay, what in my life may be contributing to disease, right? Right. This is the victorious path, right? Is the path of self-discovery, the
Right.
investigative path. The victim's path is basically like, well, my doctor said I can eat whatever I want. It's not my fault. Like, I don't need to change anything. Like, everything's fine, right? That's like the denial, the state of denial. Like,
Yeah.
and you look at that person, and a lot of times the person that is talking like that, if you get to know them, I mean, usually their life is chaos,
Yeah.
right? It's chaos. They have very dysfunctional relationships. They're eating horrible food. They're not getting enough sleep every night. They're drinking alcohol too much
Yeah.
and too often. They're already in many cases on several prescription drugs, which can weaken the immune system and make you more vulnerable to cancer and chronic disease. So it's like, once you realize, like, wait a second, what am I doing? How am I living? Like, what can I change? Then that unlocks this potential that most people just don't realize they have to take control of their life and change it for the better. So that is the big message, right? The big message. And I love you're on the same path, right? Of empowering people to realize like you don't have to be a victim. Like, and hey, personal responsibility. Like what I love to say is everything happens for a reason.
Mhm.
And most of the time, the reason is you,
That's true.
right?
It's true. You always hear everything happens for a reason, but you're right. It's true. I mean, you do have to take that self responsibility, and I think so many of us don't want to. I mean, I surely
Yeah.
didn't when I was going on my journey. I didn't want to take responsibility for the fact that I had been in a very toxic lifestyle in every which way, and all of a sudden now I was in this heavy postpartum depression. It was like, oh no, but this came from this, and this is because my family wasn't supportive of my birth, and this wasn't that. And once I finally healed all that and forgave all that and forgave myself, it was like, oh, now it's time to step into radical responsibility. But that really is
Yeah.
what God calls us to, right? Is to like God is within us and tells us like you are of the highest if you choose to accept that authority and you choose to step into it and say, and what you did, like you said, like you had to surrender all of that and have faith. And I love that you brought up gratitude too, Chris, because it is such a simple thing. And I think so many people forget about it. I know I did when I first started my journey. And that was a huge pivotal moment when things started to shift. When was I, even though I was never wanting to get out of bed, I was still writing down that I was grateful, that I was alive. I was grateful that I was, able to, open my eyes and, not start bawling my eyes out all day, and it was like these simple little things that I was grateful for, or I could hear the birds chirping, like just simple things that we should always be grateful for. But you're right, it is such a hack because it starts to really turn you into seeing that reflection of like, oh, there is so much good here for me, and now I have to actually like step into it. And I want you to speak to that for a moment of like forgiveness, because you brought that up and I feel like that's really important. Why was it so important for you? And I know, of course, everyone should read your book, Chris Beat Cancer, which is behind you here on the screen. But and it'll be in the show notes, guys, so you guys can like go and get it and everything. And I highly recommend doing so. But I want you, Chris, to speak to like why is it so important to add forgiveness into that piece besides gratitude in the process of this healing?
Forgiveness is one of the most important things you can do for yourself. And it is for you. It's not for anyone else. Um, because when you're holding on to anger and bitterness and resentment, these are very toxic emotions. They are toxic emotions. And they're not just emotions in between your ears. There is a physical manifestation of stress in your body. When you are in a state of stress, your body releases more cortisol and adrenaline. And those stress hormones are helpful for survival, but they're actually harmful if they're elevated every day of your life. If you're in this state of constant chronic stress. And that comes from just the grinding day in, day out problems of life, right? So work stress, money stress, relationship stress, right? So we have lots of stresses that come and go in life, and that's okay. But holding on to pain from your past creates stress in your body. And guess what those hormones do when they're elevated? They suppress your immune system. They promote inflammation. They dysregulate your gut and your ability to absorb the nutrients from food. They alter your brain chemistry. So you become more irrational and illogical and erratic and rash, right? And you can't make good decisions when you're in that state, right? You can't make a
Right.
thoughtful, well-reasoned, wise decision when you are in a state of stress. And so I learned this from other survivors and healers and doctors, I mean, many years ago. And I just realized, wow, forgiveness is a big piece of health and healing. And I don't want to leave any stone unturned.
Yeah.
So I made a decision to forgive every person who has ever hurt me,
Wow.
every single one, until there was no one left, right? Until there's nobody. I mean, I'm just racking my brain trying to think of any tiny offense that anyone has ever done to me that I could forgive. Okay. So I didn't do it in one sitting. It's a process, right? But when you sit quietly and you think through your life, like things are going to come up, right? When you make a decision to dig up the past,
Yeah.
right, and revisit the injuries of the past, yeah, people are going to come up, right? It's always people, right? People are the cause of pain in our lives, right? Emotional pain, and so, um, So yeah, just one by one, as I started thinking about my past. And by the way, I wasn't abused. Like I didn't have a horrible childhood, but I still was holding on to a lot of resentment and a
Yeah.
lot of um, bitterness toward, people in my past, right? That I felt had done me wrong in
Right.
small ways and big ways. And the beautiful thing about forgiveness is it's not it's not a feeling. Okay. It's a choice.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is a choice. And it totally makes sense to not feel like doing it. That's the natural. Okay. Because we're wired for justice, right? And if you feel like you've been treated unjustly, you're holding out for justice, right? So part of that anger and bitterness and resentment is you holding out for justice. But as a believer, I'm very encouraged by the fact that, you know, God says, vengeance is mine, right? And do not repay, Jesus said, do not repay evil for evil. And a big part of Jesus's ministry, I mean, he talked about it all over and over, was forgiveness.
Yeah.
He talked about it constantly. That one of the last things he said while he was dying on the cross was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. While he was hanging there in like unimaginable agony,
Hmm.
he chose to forgive in that moment, which is so like, what's your excuse? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, nobody's nailed you to a cross. So, um, I was obviously very challenged by that. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to forgive everybody. Let's just work through it, like by name. And so the simple way to do it is you just say, God, you know what they did, right? You just thinking of a person, an event, or whatever. You know what they did? They hurt me, and I don't want to forgive them, but I'm choosing to forgive. I'm
Hmm.
choosing to forgive them, and I'm letting it go. They're all yours,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
I'm releasing this. I'm releasing the pain and the anguish and the need for redemption and the need for justice. I'm just releasing it to you. I'm just trusting you can deal with them. Like I'm freeing myself from this prison of pain.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. You're freeing yourself. It's true.
Yeah.
And you're right. I love that you said, the body does hold so much. I mean, I've seen it with my own clients that, when I help them regulate their nervous system with different breathwork exercises and they start to like have all these emotions come up and they're crying or trauma comes up from their childhood that they didn't expect. And I'm like, yes, because you've been holding that and there's no judgment or shame, but like you need to release it. The body is
Yeah.
asking you to let it go, but you're right. Like the mind will hold it and will continue to absorb it. And so it's so powerful what you said about forgiveness and allowing that and
Yeah.
that it is for you. Like that's such a powerful way to put it.
It is. And I hope that, and by the way, I go into great detail on forgiveness in two of my books, actually. And one, the first book, Chris Beat Cancer, but also Beat Cancer Daily, which is like a daily devotional, daily reader.
Oh, okay.
Um, so powerful. One of the most powerful things you can do for yourself,
I
hands
believe
down.
it.
And I've met a lot of cancer patients who, they did everything right, but they wouldn't forgive.
Oh, wow. I was
And
going
that
to
can
ask if
be,
you've met people who have been on this journey and doing, similar things but don't heal.
that
Okay.
can be the one barrier to
Okay.
healing
I
is
believe that.
forgiveness,
Yeah.
is bitterness and anger and unforgiveness, and really under that larger umbrella, which is stress. And so learning how to deal with all of those stressful thoughts and emotions is really powerful. So like fear, worry, and anxiety, right? That's future-based stress.
Yeah.
Uh, Anger and bitterness, that's stress based in the past. And then your present stress would be like, envy and jealousy and being judgmental and critical and just sort of getting in these thought patterns that are negative, right?
Right.
Like all negative thoughts and emotions, create stress.
Yeah.
And becoming mindful of how you're thinking about people and things and events and yourself, like, is so important, because once you catch yourself thinking negatively, you can be like, oh, I'm doing it right now, right? I'm being judgmental right now, and I'm going to choose not to be, right?
Right.
I'm being envious right now. Let me just count my own blessings real quick, right? I'm in a state of fear or worry. Let me give that to God, right? I'm feeling resentful toward this person. Hang on, I can not choose not to,
Yeah.
right? I can forgive. And so those mental exercises, the more you do them, the better you get, right?
Yeah.
And I like to say, exercise your forgiveness muscle,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
Right. And
Exercise your forgiveness muscle.
the more you forgive, the easier it becomes. And so now I've become a person that I like to think I'm a person who's quick to forgive. Right. I'm just quick to forgive. I just, I'm online. I've been online for 13 years, sharing my story and trying to encourage people. And man, I've been attacked so many
Oh,
times.
I can
People have been
imagine.
rude to me. They say all kinds of terrible things about me. It's like, that's just the nature of being on social media and being, I guess, a public figure of, whatever. And so, yeah, so
When
I
you're
just
speaking against the
learned to
norm,
be quick
the
to forgive.
norm, right? You're speaking against what people are comfortable with. I mean,
Yeah.
I too, since my journey of all I've gone through, especially because I came from, the Hollywood space and used to live in LA. Now we actually live in Tennessee too, and all the things. And people are like, but you used to be like this. And I'm like, and I get that. And I healed from that. And now this is where I am. And, people do come with their opinions, right? And not nice things to say and everything. And I'm curious for you as you continue on your journey and you help so many people heal and actually beat cancer. Like, how do you continue to move through when that happens in the social space? I feel like so many people who are sharing their truths right now are experiencing what you just spoke to.
Yeah. Well, part of it is I've just done it so long that there's nothing that anyone can say anymore that surprises me. Two, the vast majority of people, 99% of them don't even know me,
Yeah.
that say rude things to me or on the internet. They don't even know me. So it doesn't mean anything to me. Uh, and, but regardless, if someone says something that does hurt my feelings, I just, right in the moment, I just say, you know what, God, I forgive them. You know what? That was rude. That was mean. That was definitely a personal attack, but I'm just going to choose to forgive them. I'm just
Right.
letting it go. They're all yours. And by the way, I should add, and I'm asking you to bless them,
Oh,
asking you
okay.
to bless them. I hope you don't. You know what I'm saying? But I'm asking you to bless them. That's actually, if you really want to seal the deal. And by the way, when you pray this way, God heals your heart. Like
Yeah.
that's what happens when you forgive. God heals your broken, beat up, battered, bruised heart. He
Wow.
heals your heart. And so Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And when you pray for people who persecute you and you say, God, I'm asking you to bless them, and he knows you don't want him to, he knows, but you're asking anyway. And that means a lot, right? That's you humbling yourself and saying, I'm asking you to do something that I don't want you to do, but I'm asking you to do it because I know I need to ask you to do it for me, right? I need to release this completely.
Yeah.
And man, I'm telling you, it's powerful.
Yeah,
It's
you could
so
see it. You
powerful.
could see the passion in your face
And
and
it
in the
costs you nothing,
emotion. Yeah.
right? It
Wow.
costs you nothing to do that. And like I said earlier, I mean, this really can be the difference between health and disease is this right here. Like for
Yeah.
some people, this is all they need to do, right? This is the thing
Forgive.
they need to do. Yeah.
Wow. So powerful. What a powerful conversation. Thank you, Chris, for being here. Before I let you go, and of course, tell us where we can find you and follow you. And everything, guys, will be in the show notes. Chris's book, Chris Beat Cancer Daily, the Beat Cancer Kitchen, everything. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. So make sure you guys go and get it and read it and share it with anyone you know and love, and especially anyone who may be on this journey. But Chris, before we, come off this interview, is there anything else you'd want to leave us with? And then tell us where we could find you and follow you, please. And thank you for sharing your incredibly vulnerable and powerful story.
Thanks for having me on. It's been really fun. You know, I've said a lot, but I could just close with it's important to understand that you have options. You have a lot more options than you're being told. And the medical industry certainly can be helpful, but that's a very limited set of tools to help you with chronic disease. And there's so much more you can do to help yourself get well. And we have a thriving community of people that are doing just that. And so if you want to learn more about me and learn more from me, yes, I have a book called Chris Beat Cancer. I have a daily devotional called Beat Cancer Daily for people going through cancer. And then we have a full color plant-based cookbook called Beat Cancer Kitchen, which is like amazing. It's the recipes are so good. Um, and we have a coaching program and a private support community called Square One. And you can find all that at chrisbeatcancer.com. That's my website. And by the way, I've interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people who've healed all types and stages of cancer. And so this is what I do, basically full time is I'm interviewing cancer survivors and sharing their stories, because every story is full of wisdom and you'll see the common threads. If you have cancer and you want to learn how to heal, great, read my book, but then also watch all these interviews I've done with other people who've healed. And you'll see over and over and over, like we're all doing the same things, right, to help ourselves get well. And I've interviewed a bunch of doctors and scientists and researchers. And so there's tons of like encouraging and empowering content that I've produced in the last 12 years. It's too much for any one person to go through. But anyway, you can do a search on Chris Beat Cancer for a cancer type, like for breast cancer, and read those articles and watch those survivor interviews, or lymphoma, right? So it's just that the website's become a very large repository of helpful information. So I'm really proud of it.
That's awesome. One, I love that you're shining a light on other survivors and other people who have been, in this community and that are supporting each other, because we all need each other wherever we are in this journey and this type of information. So thank you for sharing that. And again, guys, it'll all be in the show notes. So you can just make it easy on yourselves and just click the links below. Make sure that you share this as well. If this was empowering for you, share the episode online, tag Chris and I, and we will reshare it. And thank you always for being here. And I just want to say, Chris, thank you so much for your inspirational message. I think it's amazing what you're doing. And thanks for sharing it here on Awakening with Allie. So everyone, till the next show, love, light, and blessings. Be well. Thanks, everyone.